right now, let's cross over to Parliament as the debate on the budget LGBTQ bill rages on. My colleague Parker Wilson is there for us. He'll tell us more.
That the proponents of the bill want to introduce, because this is an act that you engage in private, most likely, and you want to prevent young people in schools, in colleges, from thinking that it is fashionable to be part of it, and then they end up, you know, deep in the practice where you think we should stop, but they would have already gotten deep into the practice. So one of the tools in the bill is to stop people from even wanting to identify as members of the community in whichever way. Then it adds prohibiting the conduct, it adds prohibiting the union. Given the position of the church that be compassionate, don't visit violence on people who identify, what's your position on this key tool that is being proposed? Because that's really the central issue before us.
Honorable Osler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lords, the ranking member and deputy ranking member, who are Catholics, have asked me to ask this question of you. So,
take exception to that. We never ask you to ask any question.
So
we're asking the question as of right.
Me being a Presbyterian, I'm taking the liberty to ask on their behalf. My lords, from your paper, from your presentation, you indicated that sexual activity is seen to be ordered to procreation and a continuation of the human race, but you're celibate. So how are you helping us in that regard? That's the first question. My second question really is akin to what Honorable Ayariga asked. Your paper indicates that you're writing in support of the draft bill. Your conclusion says that you condemn homosexual acts, but that the rights of persons engaged or with those tendencies should be respected. The provisions in the bill that seek to impose criminal and punitive sanctions on people who engage in those acts. How do you reconcile the two? And I see the provisions in the bill that also insist that they either recant or be punished. And I see that you're saying we should respect their acts, subject them to care and attention, assist them through, and even their families, through the difficulties and challenges that they're facing. So how do you reconcile those two positions? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other person apart from? No, I already disqualified the disappointed priest, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Chairman, my question is related to page 3 of the paper, item number 2, when the item number 2 seems to suggest that there is a mutual difference between somebody who has homosexual condition or tendency and somebody who engages in homosexual activities. I'm wondering whether this might not be an academic distinction, because to the ordinary Ghanaian, when they refer to you as this man is a homosexualist, they are saying that in fact he has been engaging in homosexual activities. Otherwise, how do you say he's a homosexualist? In other words, I say I'm a thief, but I don't steal. I'm a thief, but I don't steal. Who will appreciate that? What is the work of a thief? A thief is somebody who steals.
You attempted.
So I'm wondering whether they can expatiate so that somebody can appreciate the context in this item number 2 on page 3.
Honorable Dominica, you'll be the last on this.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Your Lordships, for the honor done the committee. When His Lordship, Palmer Buckle, was making the presentation, he talked about certain fundamental human rights that must be respected, including the right of homosexuals not to be discriminated against based upon certain suspect criteria. For instance, ethnicity, sex, and so on. And I wanted to know, I've read some literature regarding the U.S. Catholic Church taking the position that discrimination based upon sexual orientation is unconstitutional. And I wanted to know from you whether, when you mention sex, in the context of discrimination, in our Constitution, Article 17 is very clear that you cannot be discriminated against on the basis of sex. But sex is often, in that context, interpreted to mean gender. Would you consider, will you agree that sex in that context should be expanded, to include sexual orientation?
Milos, I think we'll take your responses now. After that, I will give you the opportunity.
Permit me to say that a bill has been brought to Parliament, and I think yours is to look at the bill and to see if there are excesses or flaws in it, point them out. But the generality of the bill is what we are pursuing. As to some of what we call the dotting the I's and crossing the T's, that is why you are lawmakers. So we are not going to debate what the bill is supposed to have presented. The generality of the bill, which we support very strongly, is that homosexual activity is intrinsically disordered. And therefore, if it is intrinsically disordered according to our Christian beliefs, our Islamic beliefs, our traditional religious beliefs, and so on and so forth, you, our lawmakers, whom we have voted there, you have a responsibility and a duty to fashion the bill in such a way that you answer our sovereign aspirations. And I think that is a basis that we and you should not run away from. It's very important. Having said that, I will most probably just, indulge in a few, answers. And the first one, for instance, is how can you protect the rights of a homosexual, whereas you condemn the activity? I'll give you a very simple example from the scriptures. Jesus Christ and the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8. They brought the woman before Jesus. And I tell you, one of the reasons why I would like to go to heaven is to ask Jesus whether a woman alone can commit adultery. And where were the men? I don't know. This is just for your entertainment. I like to go to heaven and ask God about that. But that aside, permit me to zero in on the fact that Jesus, we are told, said, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." And he bent down and started writing. Another reason why I would like to go to heaven is to find out what he was writing. We don't know. We are conjecturing. But what is also interesting is when they left, and we are told they left one by one, beginning from the oldest to the youngest, because the older you are, the more sins you have. And so the old ones like me, they went away one by one. And Jesus was left alone with the woman. And he said, "Woman, has no one condemned you?" And I think those of you who deal in law and the rest, there was no prima facie case brought against the woman, because there was nobody there to answer yes. He said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." So Jesus makes a clear distinction between what is the activity which is abominable and condemnable, and the person whose image and dignity must not in any way at all be rubbished, even in when a judgment is being pronounced on the person. This is just my contribution.
I like to take the case of celibacy and procreation. I think you are all aware that Jesus was celibate. And yet, his self-giving and total obedience to the Father was so perfect that he was able to reconcile us sinners, even while we were still sinners, to God. The celibate is not seen as one who is only not giving birth to children, but he's offering everything that he is and he has to God, preferentially to the poor and the needy. The three of us sitting here and many priests have raised children whose parents could not do that. And the simple reason is that we're offering our whole selves, the whole life to God. Because if I were to get married, I don't know where I would have found a woman who would accept that I leave her children, or even if you don't leave them, but to take so many children belonging to different people, different ethnic groups, different tribes, and raise them from primary school to university. You will have your own family descend on you. If you are working and having money, they will want to decide who within the family you should support and who not. So that is another value of celibacy. Apart from the fact that you learn to sympathize with a whole lot of people who are lonely and have nobody to love them. They find that at least when they go to a priest, is someone they can talk to without reservation. He can empathize with them and practically even help them. And so we are not producing our own children in terms of adding to population. But because we are alive and dedicated to God, that many people who would otherwise have died, especially children, are still alive. And not only alive, contributing tremendously to human population as well. So this is what I can say for now.
Thank you, my Lord. Honorable Sisi, you have a question?
I'd like to add something.
Sorry, hold on. My Lord, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Somebody raised the issue of the tendency to be homosexual and then the act of being homosexual. Now, the tendency is different. You know, you all have the inclination, maybe the tendency to go and commit adultery. But that doesn't make you an adulterer until you commit the act. And so the fact that you are homosexual or you have that tendency doesn't mean that you have committed a sin. It's when you go out and do it, then you've committed the act. Then also there was the issue of the use of sex in our language, talking about human rights. So the right not to be discriminated against on the basis of sex. Now this sex is, like as you said, gender, because you cannot discriminate against a woman because it's a woman. So if you do that, then you are discriminating against her on the basis of sex. And so homosexuals also have rights, the fundamental human rights. And so the right to life, right to education, right to shelter, and so on. All these are basic to all human beings, and they also enjoy that. But then, you know, when they say that they have the right to marry a man or a woman, so if you're a man, you cannot marry a man. That one is not a fundamental human right. It is not included in the definition of fundamental human rights.
Thank you. Hold on, Dominic. Honorable Soso.
No. Okay. Can I, let me.
Hold on. Honorable Dominic, I'll come to you. Please follow up.
My Lord, I asked the question. I said, the bill goes beyond just prohibiting the act and says that you cannot even identify yourself as belonging to the LGBT community. Because the argument you make about LGBT members having fundamental human rights, that is if you even exist. You must exist in the face of the law to claim rights. But this bill is saying that you shouldn't even proclaim your existence as a member of any of the identities described as LGBT. And so if you keep insisting that, oh, LGBT has rights, it means that we should recognize them to exist, but when they engage in the act, we should punish them, or, like Jesus prescribed, we should find other ways of discouraging them from the act without necessarily throwing them into prison. And so we just wanted your take on that specific issue.
Permit me to say that I don't think we would like to defend somebody else's. We want to make our point. And that is why I said, and I beg you, that you are the lawmakers. That was my answer. You are the lawmakers. And therefore, if you are going to fashion a law that will come out completely against somebody else's fundamental human rights, I think it is our parliament that will be blamed. I'd like, however, to come out and say clearly, in all cultures, because of the sacredness in which they held sex and sexual activity and sexuality, they always circumscribed it with very draconian laws. All cultures, you can go right through. All cultures have had cases where any form of aberration, sexual aberration, was punishable by death, by stoning, because of the danger that it posed to the greater good of humanity, not just of the individual. I will agree that some of the sanctions were draconian. But I like to believe that even capital punishment is only meant to deter, am I right? And that if a person should commit a crime that deserves even capital punishment, it is only the ultimate In fact, that is another reason why the Catholic Church is now fighting against capital punishment. So I'll leave it at that. Lawmakers, please, there will be a lot of opinions expressed, and it is our hope and prayer that you would respect the sovereignty of this country and not allow the intrusion of anybody and any culture and any, body to hold us to ransom. It's a high time we stood on our feet and declared what we believe in. And that is why various opinions have been brought, pro and contra. Please listen to them as dispassionately. I cannot stand here, spend this little time you have given me to defend somebody else's, but generally, we are in favor of the fact that LGBTQ activities pose a greater challenge to our dear country, Ghana. And therefore, we think something has to be done to forestall what could become an irreversible situation like has happened in other cultures.
Honorable Sosu. Yeah, he says he has a concern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Your Lordships, there are other groups that appeared before this committee and argued that criminalizing the act as it stands amounts to criminalizing sin. Because you are eminent religious leaders, would want to have your views on that position, that the proposal as it stands amounts to criminalizing sin. And my lords, the second one has to do with Romans chapter 1, verse 16, where the Bible says that, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to them that believe." And I'm quoting that scripture in respect of the testimony of one young man who claimed to be a homosexual until he met Christ. And then he changed, and he's now a straight and not a homosexual. And that the power to change persons who are homosexuals lies in the gospel than in criminal law. What do you have to say about that?
My Lord, I may want to ask this question in another way. And I want to find out if it will be all right for us as parliamentarians to conclude that these activities are immoral. God is not happy with this act, and therefore we leave it to the priests to deal with them without putting them to jail. Would we be right? Thank you.
We priests are not judges. We are pastors, and we will do whatever we can to convert such people so that the gospel of Christ will change them. But you are the lawyers, and so you decide on what should be done with them. So division of labor.
Joe, we are getting into a certain realm. But I'd like to say, please, if you are interested in a theological discourse, we will be ready to come and give purely theological discourse. I hope you understand that. So that as to criminalizing sin, yes or no, we are entering into the realm of theology. We are entering into the realm not necessarily of legalities and the rest. And so I will beg us to stay out of that, because this, you are now raising us into a certain realm that we would need to give you a whole background. I think that is what our paper did. God created them. male and female, he created. He had a purpose. He is the ultimate, and he is asking us to do, and therefore the consequences are. But we did not want to bore you with, theological momo jumbo. So that is why we sometimes have to respect your jurisdiction. I beg you, we want to respect your jurisdiction. We would not like you to forego the responsibility that is upon you. For to them that more is given, more will be required.
My Lord, we are grateful. Dominic Aine, Honorable, you said you had a concern. You will be the last.
His Lordship, Archbishop Osebunsu, on the issue of sexual orientation, gave an answer that I wasn't very satisfied with. And that's because...
You don't need to be satisfied.
No. I think that the public hearings are very important for us. We have the task of passing a law. Interest groups, such as, the Catholic Church, are putting a position before us. We have to be persuaded, of that position, so that in our debates, we can be informed, because we are a deliberative body, by the positions that have been brought to us by the various interest groups. So I'm very keen about this issue, because I was happy that the position that the church has taken is the position that I hold. But on the issue, not because I'm a disappointed priest, but the chairman keeps referring to me without calling out my name. So, yes, but for instance, let's say there is a minor seminary in your diocese or archdiocese, and there is a homosexual mathematics teacher. He has not molested any of the students. He hasn't engaged in any homosexual activity on campus. He's not trying to convert students to homosexuality and so on. But then your rector fires him when he realizes that he's a homosexual. That is discrimination based upon sexual orientation. What will be your position on that?
Honorable Dominic Aine.
Yeah.
Probably you would want them to say black and white that do this to them. And I'm not sure we are going to get that from the Honorable, the eminent men. I think that this has been answered. They have said emphatically that the position of the church is that the act is wrong, but we don't have to discriminate against them. And if you read the paper, that expression is mentioned like 3 times in the paper. And nevertheless, my lords, if you have something to add.
I just wanted to say more or less what you have said. With seminarians, it's a different thing than the example that you have given. If a mathematics teacher is doing his work well, and even if it is known that he's a homosexual, unless it is also found out that he is soliciting for homosexual practice among the seminarians he's teaching, I don't think it will be cause for dismissal. So that's just what I want to say. But if apart from the teaching the mathematics, he's also luring others into the homosexual practice, where in many cases, identifying with the group also means practicing. And that's why it is a very, very subtle thing. And I agree with Archbishop Buckle to say that when it comes to deviant human behavior, I think that you, the lawyers, are better trained to deal with measures that you can put in place to deter people from that than we. We always counsel and hope that they will they will reform. Yeah. So thank you. That's what I wanted to add.
Right, sir. If you have some concluding remarks.
You need the virtue of neutrality. In other words, you have to listen to all parties. But protecting Ghanaians from a form of evil which is detested by all levels of our cultural values and Ghanaian values is also a great task that is given to you. If all the traditional people say we don't want this thing, the religious bodies, Islam, say we don't want this thing, the Christian denominations, various Christian denominations, we don't want this thing to come up in any scale that could destroy our upcoming youth. Because we also have to know that they are very vulnerable. People are going into our schools and saying all.
And you're watching their parliament where they're going through the memoranda that was submitted for the LGBTQI plus bill. This is something we're monitoring, and trust JoyNews will be bringing you more in our subsequent bulletins. And that'll be it for the polls this afternoon. Up next is Let's Talk Showbiz. But for more news, you need to log on to myjoyonline.com and you get updates of all the developing stories. So enjoy the rest of our programs.